Is Le Mans Ultimate on course to replace Assetto Corsa Competizione as many people's default go-to racing simulator? I think it might be, and I'm going to explain why in this video. And I'm also going to explain why LMU is starting to nail one of the most important aspects and features that most sims completely fail at. The meteor's coming to end sim racing! Hallelujah! Remember, you have to be a subscriber if you want to be able to unsubscribe, so subscribe to then unsubscribe. Some people do it multiple times a day. I don't know what they're doing with their lives. Also, you can click the like button, or don't, it's up to you. First things first, it's worth saying that just because a new simulator's come out, it doesn't mean that you should stop playing one that you're currently enjoying. And just because new games have arrived doesn't mean that the older ones are completely invalid. I mean, just yesterday I installed Trespasser, the first-person shooter dinosaur game from the 90s with a wonky hand, and it was quite fun actually, and that was from 300 years ago. So it's the same with driving simulators. Just because LMU's here doesn't mean that you can't then play iRacing, ACC, or Moorhun go-kart racing. You know, it doesn't matter. You've got lots of choice, so it's great that you've got more choice. However, you do get sims that become the sort of go-to platforms that most people end up playing for specific features. So for multiplayer, for example, or for single player, or for vintage cars, for rally, or, you know, for certain things. Like, you do get stuff that people tend to gravitate to, and then I think it is interesting to see what people are gravitating towards and for what reasons. And obviously the biggest reason why people play ACC is because sadly they lost their hands in an industrial accident and are no longer able to perceive force feedback, or what is good force feedback. But aside from that, people generally play it because they know what they are getting. It's a relatively simple package. It's GT3 cars, and thanks to low fuel motorsport, every hour you're able to guarantee that you can jump on and do a race. And I have to say, I think this aspect of there's a race every hour with something predictable that you've got used to and doesn't change too much is probably, when it comes to multiplayer racing, one of the most valuable features that a racing simulator can have. It's more important than fabled force feedback. It's more important than glorious physics. More important than content variety, or even having cars that are actually sensical for racing, which certainly would not be GT3 cars, as they drive like concrete sledges even when they're done really well. And you see this in simulators that have been wildly successful despite them having terrible physics and force feedback, or being very wonky in many other ways, or even costing a lot of money. iRacing, for example. What people want, if they want to do multiplayer racing, is they want a guaranteed experience that's available each hour. So this is the thing that so many simulators have completely failed on, and so many racing games have completely failed on, is that they don't offer a coherent, obvious product to the end user, and with multiplayer they don't offer a predictable race every hour or so. So predictability and convenience, I think, are the most important thing, not just when it comes to sim racing, to be fair, but for most products and most things that exist in life. It is really surprising, actually. It took mainstream gaming a long time to really realise this, with games, many games, Battlefield, Counter-Strike, whole bunch of games, took years to get to a point where they would do matchmaking, automated service systems, and basically make it so that a player could go, oh, I feel like playing this, and I can get a game within 30 minutes. So, you know, maybe to be kind, the sim industry is a bit behind the general gaming industry, and sims are also monstrously complex, so it's understandable that they're a little bit slow to come to things, given that the games industry itself was also very slow to come to the obvious conclusion of what a consumer probably wants. Right, with all that out the way though, if you look at the current simulators, the ones that offer you a reasonably good jumping multiplayer race experience every hour, you basically have iRacing, ACC with low fuel motorsports, Gran Turismo 7, and then LMU. Now I would say GT7 is kind of in its own category, what with it being on the PlayStation, it's a separate walled garden, and it's also, it's a fantastic game, I actually quite like it, but it's more of a sort of bridge title between playing with a gamepad versus playing with a steering wheel. You can play it very seriously, but you know what I mean, it's its own separate category. So that then leaves you on the PC with iRacing, ACC and LMU. Now I would also say that iRacing is very much in its own category, largely due to the range of content on it and the type of product and service that it is, but also due to the sheer cost of iRacing. It really does segregate itself from a lot of people and a lot of sim racers, especially people in other countries where they don't earn as much, or people that just don't have as much free wealth or don't want to entirely dedicate themselves to one video game. There's a lot of iRacers, a very sizable proportion of iRacers that their hobby is iRacing. They don't really like many other driving simulators or driving games or other games at all. They are just iRacers. There's this sort of, it's its own thing, right? So then, now that leaves you with ACC and LMU. And ACC, let's face it, I think its days are somewhat numbered. Mostly because Kunos are now obviously focused on Assetto Corsa Evo. Though I do feel like Evo's going to take at least a year and a half to fully develop. But I get the impression that Kunos are going to have the integrated multiplayer in Evo, and GT3 will obviously be popular because GT3 is popular, so I think Evo will be the Kunos replacement for ACC, but Kunos are no longer really developing ACC, so they've abandoned it. Also, recent updates to ACC were not the most well received, or the last updates were not that well received. And then I think a really big thing is that ACC uses low fuel motorsport. And you have to give credit to Low Fuel Motorsport. I think they did an absolutely fantastic job. I think they actually saved ACC in many ways, and their sort of moderation and many aspects of how they ran the service with ACC in particular, I think they deserve a lot of credit for. However, the reality is it's a separate service to the video game. It's outside of it. It's not official. It's become like the official thing for ACC. But I don't think that anything that's outside of the video game directly could ever have this sort of default official stamp to it, if that makes sense, in terms of how users consider the validity of the ranking and the EPEAN component. For EPEAN to matter, it has to, I think, come directly from the game. With ACC, they didn't have a direct game thing, so LFM ended up offering that to a degree, but it's not in the game. So basically you're left then with LMU as having a coherent, solid product. It's got a focus to it. Sure, the amount of cars and tracks might be limited, but I don't think that really matters that much, to be honest. You have the ranking built into the game. The EPEAN system is built into the game. You can already compare EPEAN with people that have glorious amounts of EPEAN, like the master of slipslide, Michi Hoyer. I've tried to get his EPEAN to rub off on me, but it didn't work. And all the other EPEAN masters are there. You then just have the convenience of being able to load Lemans Ultimate up and get your safety rating, ranking, play the game every hour, and it does just work now. This is the thing. I jumped onto Lemans Ultimate last week. We've been streaming it every now and again, and every time I've played it, I have just had a decent and fun time. I'm not saying it's totally perfect. There was some bad driving. There were some people crashing. There were some small technical issues and stuff, like every video game. It wasn't perfect, but as a consistency of product of, I feel like doing a race. Load up the game. Oh, we're in a race. Where did we finish? Did we get points? As a sort of gameplay loop, it was really coherent and really refreshing. Really simple to understand and just basically enjoyable, which is just very rare from sim racing. And as much as I liked the general structure of ACC, and I actually really like LFM, I'm not a fan of how ACC drives its force feedback. You guys know that, but I do appreciate aspects of ACC. I feel that LMU offers just a more cohesive, easy to access, more rewarding to play video game than ACC, and you've now got an update that's coming out to LMU where they're adding more GT3 cars, some more track layouts and further improvements to it. So I really see that LMU is going to pilfer and attract and allure this sort of ACC crowd over to it. Simply because I think it offers the gameplay loop in the most simplistic, immediate and consistent form. So I really do think LMU is going to basically replace ACC as the sort of default GT3 ranked simulator for many people. Obviously, as I say, it's separate to iRacing. I think iRacing is always just going to chug along whatever they do. It's got its own fan base. And GT7 is always going to chug along. It's got its own fan base. Where this could get really interesting, I think, is in a year or so's time when Evo is no longer early access so that you can complain, and Evo maybe has integrated multiplayer and maybe does the ACC thing even better. But at this point in time, Evo is really in a it's really not in a good way, which you might not expect that from a game that's a year off from actually being launched, but it's not in a particularly polished way. You need a supercomputer to run it well, and there's questionable components to it, as you'd expect of a game in development, so that's all just up in the air. So as it is right now, LMU is going from stride to stride, and it's the surprise of the year, I'd say. I think LMU, when it launched its early access, was getting slapped around, but they've just kept polishing away. And also, I think maybe the mainstream doesn't get this or appreciate it, but I think your sort of weirdo sim racers that I would unfortunately put myself in this sort of category. I think the weirdo sim racers that have been doing a lot of sim racing for a long time appreciate the focus on attention to detail on things that a lot of people would just not care about or miss, like just tweaking UI things, just tweaking tyres to absurd degrees, little tweaks, just small things that add up. The camera settings, for example, in LMU, and how smooth it is, and general optimizations that have occurred. General format choices, the car setups and things. There's a whole lot of stuff in a simulator that's very subtle that a developer tends to only get right if they are also totally insane sim racers, and you get that kind of boutique development culture around a simulator. And I think LMU has that to it. And you notice that, and you've noticed that as it's been improved. So, yeah, I'm putting my chips on the table, guys. They're only like 20p chips. I'm not good at poker, but I think LMU is going from stride to stride. Maybe it'll be barraged by Evo, but at this point in time, I think LMU is going to pilfer ACC. But as I said at the beginning, you can keep playing ACC if you enjoy it. I think it's going to have a pretty healthy player base for quite a while. I think Low Fuel Motorsports, obviously, they're quite happy with what they're doing. So I don't think anyone's really losing out at this point in time. I think in the future, you might get a threshold where the players have divided so much that you if you want to race every hour, especially if you're in North America, you're going to have to decide between one or the other. But for now, and for at least the next 6 months or year, I think you're going to just be able to choose between them. So it doesn't really matter, you know, either way. It's not the YouTube thumbnail title of "This game killed this game." It's, you know, it's never that simple. But there you go. It's food for thought, and I'm looking forward to the update that's coming to LMU, and that's it. So, thank you for watching this video, guys. I hope you've had 3 cups of tea, and I will see you in the next one that we do. Take care, happy tea drinking, and goodbye.